Welcome to Tech Topics brought to you by Cybervenger. We help keep small businesses stay protected and compliant with cutting-edge cybersecurity and IT solutions.
Hello everyone, my name is Andy, the managing consultant for Cybervenger. Today we want to talk about the breach that occurred for 23andMe back in October. They are re-releasing new details about this breach that just came out. It says, oh well, it was a little worse than we thought. So in this case, I think it's worth re-bringing up the topic, even though this is about 2 months old. Originally, it was stated that they had about 1.1% of their 14 million customers' data was taken by hackers. Now it looks like a lot more of the data was taken. Now they're saying something closer to 7 million, which is about half their customers. Other sources that I looked up online disclosed that it looks like about 300 terabytes worth of data, of raw data, was taken. And if you do the math, that comes out to be, if 7 million people, half their customers, 7 million divided, 300 terabytes divided by that, you end up with about 40 or so megabytes worth of data is taken. So the first question you might think of with a site, with any ancestry site involved in a breach, is what data, how much of my genetic data is compromised in that? That's kind of the real fear, right? Names, addresses, information like that is bad enough, but that's kind of a common breach. 23andMe is going to store other sensitive information that might be unique to them, or at least to that class of company. Now, as far as I can tell from what I've been reading, I don't think 23andMe did anything wrong in terms of how they protected the data, how they reported it even, although I'm a little skeptical of the fact that they reported such a big jump almost 2 months later. They didn't know this was happening. But in their defense, I have a suspicion as to why. I'll talk about that in a second, because I think there was two different breaches that happened. First, there was that 0.1% that got into the data itself. But what also happened is the attackers, and this is our lessons learned for what you should all be doing to protect yourselves. I always like to throw in a little bit of what can you do to protect yourself. I don't want this to be straight fear-mongering. Although, confession time, 23andMe and other similar business model sites kind of really put me at dis-ease. I find them very scary. Politically, it's from a societal standpoint, there's a lot wrong there, a lot to worry about. Not so much this company specific, but just the idea of storing people's genomes. And that kind of data, having that data out there in a massive, juicy, tempting database is bad. We'll talk about that in a second too. But getting back to the actual data. So it looks like it was breached kind of at the company level, caught and stopped. And then later they found out what they were also doing, they being the attackers. And this is the far more effective approach. They're taking known breaches that have already occurred out there. I mean, people get hacked all the time, right? I mean, I'm cranking these videos out left and right, reactions too, trying to translate how bad things were, how they got in, lessons learned, that kind of stuff. It happens all the time. Plenty of video fodder material. The consequence of this is all that data is out there for sale on the dark web. There's a whole market of underground sites where people who collected this kind of data go to sell it. Certain data is more valuable than others, but usually the more records, the more valuable it is. The more unique the information, the more valuable it is. The more actionable the information, like things like credit card numbers, are probably more valuable than simply addresses, that kind of stuff. You get the idea. So what they did here is they would buy a database breach, a database of usernames and passwords from other breaches. Let's say maybe the network solutions data breach was a while back. The credit union breaches, Experian and all that, those hacks. I mean, there's all kinds of hacks we can get data. And then they take the passwords that were used then, and they take the email address. People usually have an email address associated for everything, right? You go to a bank, oh, they want your email address. You go to 23andMe, they want an email address. You sign up for this, you sign up for that, everything wants an email address. That's why I always tell you, who'd want to read my email? Anybody. for no other reason than that email address tends to be used to reset passwords, so you can get into anything if you got access to that account. But that's a whole another video. But no, what they did here is they knew the password, they knew the email used there, and they try and use that combo elsewhere, because the email address and password is something that gets reused. I mean, who wants to memorize some complex password 12 different times, or 100 different times, depending on how many sites you go to? So a lot of people reuse that kind of information. I used to be guilty of it back in the day. I certainly don't do it now, but a lot of people do. And I tell people you want to break up your passwords, different class of passwords for different things. And you want to change that frequently. There's a debate about changing passwords. I don't want to get into that in this video. NIST has actually published an argument for not changing passwords now that two-factor is becoming the norm. But I digress. So the terms of service have now been changed. They're also pushing you to have two-factor. That is the real defense against this kind of thing. But if you reuse your passwords, you got to stop doing that. You should have a unique password for every site that you go to, because it's precisely this kind of attack that can happen anywhere. I mean, if you're using this same password at your bank as for your health insurance, for an employee portal, for some social media, for 23andMe, or some other site like that, once somebody figures out the password in one place, they can use it everywhere. They can go to all kinds of public sites and try it out. So you want to be careful about doing that. And that weakness is an end-user weakness. This wasn't 23andMe's fault, at least that particular hack of it. So I kind of see this as two different breaches. So now, that's the technical side of things. No, we'll talk more about the data. I talked about the size of the data. 300 terabytes taken. They think that's about 40 megabytes per person. So you're looking at something that's not necessarily big enough to take the entire human genome, but I think it's big enough to take the unique parts. I mean, all humans have things in common, right? We have two eyes, we have a brain go up here instead of down there, or, we also get sweaty feet and stinky armpits, we're built kind of the same. There's a lot of genetic code that is absolutely identical from person to person to person. I think 23andMe may save that raw data as differencing data. Now, I don't know. This is speculation on my part, so bear that in mind. But it's conceivable that the raw data, minus the common stuff that every human has to have in order to be human, could fit in 40 megs of data. If that's the case, then people were able to access, the bad guys were able to access raw DNA information. That's very scary, because you can run all kinds of analysis on millions of people. But here's where it gets scary. The information that was readily available in the database of things like medical history, medical problems, genetic dispositions for things, and race, religion, whatever, all that comes in culture information. One of the reasons they found this breach happened is that the attackers were trying to sell this data on the dark web, and they were looking to get a high dollar value for all the registered Jewish ancestry customers on those records. Think about what's going on geopolitically right now. Think about the Hamas and Israel war going on right now. It's not far-fetched to think that an organization might try to, in this case Hamas, because it's Jewish data, might try to take that data and exploit it. I mean, this information contains full names, locations, addresses, stuff like that, as well as the fact that they are of Jewish ancestry. That sounds like, to me, like a hit list waiting to happen. It's kind of terrifying. And then information never goes away. You can't change your genes, right? You can change your social security number. It's a pain, but you can do it. You can change your address. You can move. You can change your phone number. You can change your email. You can change your name. You can change all kinds of things, but you can never change your genome. Even from generation to generation, your kids will always have shared genes with you. Grandkids, cousins. That's why it's so dangerous to put that kind of information out there. It's dangerous in the hands of the government, let alone private companies. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, they have privacy policies to protect against that information being misused. First, have you read the privacy policy? Have you had a lawyer look at it? I doubt it. In the case of 23andMe, I believe a couple key problems with that privacy policy is, first, it's not protected by HIPAA. So they do not need to protect those records to the same level of standards as a doctor would protect your records. So they can have it unencrypted. They can have it sitting up, they don't have to be taking all the security measures that a doctor's office does, making it vulnerable to attackers. Second, an attacker doesn't care about privacy policies. These are bad people. That's what they are, right? They're criminals. Duh. They're going to do criminal thing, and they're not going to respect your right to privacy at all. Their job is to violate it for money. So don't expect a privacy policy to protect you in the case of a breach. Don't expect a privacy policy to protect you in the case of the government. Any privacy policy is one court order away from being null and void at a moment's notice from whatever jurisdiction that the company who has that data applies to. This is not a 23andMe problem. This isn't any genetic registry problem. Private companies that store this data, certainly public companies, I would encourage everyone, I'm getting a little political, bear with me, as you go through life and as political issues come up, I would encourage everyone to resist anything that stores people's private DNA in any database online for any reason whatsoever, because it's just waiting to be found. And when you have a database of millions, it's a juicy target. I mean, yeah, you could pluck some hair out of one person's head and get their genome, one person at a time. That's prohibitively expensive. But when you have a database just sitting there waiting to get used, it begs for problems. And they could be used further down the road. What if the country you're in happens to be at war with a different country that you didn't expect to down the line? Maybe you're good friends with this nation, and tomorrow, I mean, think of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Ukraine and Russia were neighbors. They were, both part of the Soviet Union. I bet you a lot of people in Ukraine didn't expect Russia to suddenly become so aggressive. Or imagine you're a Russian citizen in Ukraine now. You're probably the target of all kinds of, let's say, hard feelings, put it politely. You might not want your ancestry information available in a public findable database. You might not want your DNA sitting out there to figure out who you're really related to. These are all just off the top of my head ideas why you don't want that information out there. In the case of 23andMe and other vendors, yes, it's compelling to want to know about your family. I get it, but you didn't have to give that information over. And you should never give information like that, or really any information, unless you really need to. Once information's out there, you can't take it back. It's there. The internet's forever. This information, those 7 million people now have that information in Lord knows whose hands, and it will stay that way forever. That information will never get deleted off the internet. It will always be there. Someone's going to hang on to a treasure trove like that. When I say treasure trove, I don't take that lightly. They were trying to sell the whole database complete for $50 million. And the subsets of the data for anywhere ranging from $1 or $2 per record, all to $10,000 for small subsets. I don't know what they were charging for the list of Jewish records, but there's like 1 million people that were Jewish recorded in the Ancestry website, in 23andMe's website. So they're probably asking a pretty penny, and I bet you that information become very valuable to the wrong hands. And I bet you a terrorist organization would be willing to pay a lot of money for something like that. So don't put that information out there. If you can, and you have to put information out there, let's say you're using social media and they want to know your race, decline. Just don't answer it. They don't need to know that. I wouldn't put that information everywhere around, because you never know who's going to find it and use it against you, legitimately or illegitimately. More likely illegitimately, but hey, maybe, national policies change. I don't know. You never know what's coming down in the future. That information, again, once it's out there, it's out there. So I would encourage people, and we have another video about social media. I don't like putting information in social media. If I'm forced to, I don't like telling the truth in social media. And if I'm forced to, I don't use the social media. Remember, social media, all various platforms usually have terms and service about saying, not lying about who you are and putting false information in there. Okay, that's great and all. But they can ignore their own privacy policies upon threat of legal action. And a lot of times, that legal action isn't sufficient enough to stop them. Like, if you're going to make $100 million to violate your own privacy policy, and the fine for doing so is $1 million, if you have no scruples, you're going to go make a profit of $99 million like that, right? Take the same philosophy. Find out what the penalty is. If you're going to lie in social media, well, how about, what are they going to do, kick you off? Last time I know, it's not criminal unless you're trying to interpret it in an official capacity, like you're trying to take a loan to somebody else. Yeah. But if you're just lying about your age and your birth date and your place of birth and sensitive information that shouldn't be out there anyway, I think the worst they can do is kick you off. Don't quote me, not a lawyer. Do that kind of thing at your own discretion. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do that to change people's impression about you, for financial reasons. That's fraud. But if you're just out there in social media and you want some anonymity, I don't think that's such a bad thing, ethically speaking. And I don't even think it's all that significant, legally speaking. Again, do your own research there. I don't recommend crime, obviously, but, I don't know if I'm on Facebook, I want to put my birthday out there. So, if someone was up there, asking me how to protect this kind of information, that's the only thing you could do is not let it out there in the first place. Anyway, I think that's enough on this attack. I think that gets the point across as to what was taken. Hopefully you got a clue there. What could be happening with this information, what you could do about the future. Certainly, as always, two-factor authentication is huge. Not putting information up there that you don't absolutely need to put anywhere on the internet. Don't put it out there if you can avoid it. And all the rest of the usual information. Don't share passwords. Don't reuse passwords. Those are all standard tips. And that's pretty much the usual. So thanks for watching. I'm Andy. I hope to see you in the next video, and I hope you enjoyed this one.
Thanks for watching. We hope this video has provided valuable information to you. Be sure to share this video with other small business owners to spread the word about the importance of cybersecurity. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. If you want more information about cybersecurity, visit us at www.cybervenger.com.